Given the nationwide context of the violence, and in order to provide punishment and deterrence, in accordance with the overarching principles of sentencing, severe sentences will follow for those who are found to have participated in incidents of violence or incited them. Turning to the offences. On the 3rd of August, there were 2 demonstrations in Leeds outside the art gallery on the Hedgerow. One demonstration was protesting against immigration, the other against racism. That second demonstration had been attended by you and others in your group and in other groups. Both sets of protesters were entitled to protest peacefully. Both are entitled to the protection of the law. After demonstrating, you walked in a group, together with others, perhaps in other groups, towards and along Great George Street. What happened next has been captured on CCTV footage. On Great George Street, you encountered 4 white males who had been protesting against immigration. They were walking in the opposite direction in the road, and 2 were wearing Union flags. It is clear that something was said between the 2 groups. It is not clear to me who spoke first, and in one sense it matters little. You, Ghafoor, say that you were racially abused, and I accept that that might be so. An outbreak of violence in a public street in the middle of Leeds, and was started by a group with which you were associated. It lasted for around 30 seconds, and it involved punches and kicks by your group towards those whom you had attacked. In other words, the groups came together. A missile was also thrown in the direction of the 4 males, but also towards the bar outside which this violence took place. There were people inside the bar looking out upon the violence. You, Samir Ali, were the second person into the attack. You threw left and right-handed punches towards a bald man, and then you participated in the smaller group by following that group across the road towards the bar. There you confronted a second man, whom you also punched. You then attacked a third man, who was being held by others. Then you returned to the second man. You punched him, causing him to fall to the ground, and then kicked him whilst he was on the ground. Each of the punches thrown towards the first and second men were full force punches. You then walked towards a man who was lying on the ground and kicked him too, before being pulled off by a member of your own group. You walked away down the centre of the road, laughing and congratulating yourself and others in your group, turning towards those whom you had attacked, with your arms out wide as you left through the traffic, which had stopped as a result of the disorder. You, Ghafoor, turned and then ran across the road in order to join in on the violence. You targeted a man who was being restrained by others and aimed punches at his head and body. They appear to have connected. You then walked off, waving to the white males whom you had attacked, inviting further confrontation before leaving. The actions of the 2 of you are not to be viewed in isolation. This was a group attack involving in excess of 10 men in the circumstances of a heightened state of public concern and anxiety to which each of you have contributed. Those who were attacked were kicked and punched by your group. 2 days later, each of you surrendered yourselves to the police. You were interviewed but made no comment. You have now admitted your guilt. Samir Ali, you are 21 years of age with no other convictions. Adnan Ghafoor, you are 31 years of age. You have a conviction in 2015 for 2 offences of racially or religiously aggravated common assault and causing fear or provocation of violence. On the 10th of April 2024, you were convicted of dangerous driving and driving whilst disqualified and received a term of 20 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. You are in breach of that suspended sentence. You have completed over 1/3 of the hours ordered. I turn to the sentencing guidelines. Samir Ali, I'm satisfied that your offending falls into culpability category A. This was the targeting of individuals by a group. There was also the use of a weapon to inflict violence, namely a shod foot. Finally, this was the use of serious violence. In terms of harm, this falls into category 1, since there was serious fear and distress caused to those present who witnessed this incident, and one of those attacked sustained 2 broken teeth. Adnan Ghafoor, you fall into the same categories of culpability and harm, since this was a group attack. You acted in concert with the others, and therefore you are jointly responsible, albeit that you played a slightly reduced role. The starting point for a Category 1A offence is 2 years custody, with a range of 18 months to 2 years 9 months. There are aggravating factors, since the incident occurred in a busy public area. You, Samir Ali, played a leading role in a group activity, and a large number of people will have been affected by this incident. The nature of your conduct, when set against the background of serious public disorder occurring at the time of your offending, also justifies an upward adjustment from the starting point. In terms of mitigation, you are each entitled to full credit for your guilty pleas, and the sentences that I am about to impose have been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty pleas. Samir Ali, before this incident you were of good character. I take account of your age, and I have read the character references from your family members and employer. I balance that against the requirement for punishment and deterrence, and accordingly the weight that I can give to your previous good character is limited. Adnan Ghafoor, I have taken into account the principle of totality when considering the overall term of imprisonment to be served by you, and I do not double count for the breach of your suspended sentence order. I bear in mind that you have completed 1/3 of the hours ordered. I have also read the character references from your last case. The sentences. In your case, Samir Ali, for the offence of affray, the sentence is 20 months imprisonment. In your case, Adnan Ghafoor, for the offence of affray, the sentence is 18 months imprisonment. In addition, you will serve a consecutive period of 12 months for the breach of the suspended sentence order. The total sentence in your case will be one of 2.5 years in prison. You will both serve up to 1/2 of those sentences in custody before you are released on licence. If you fail to abide by the conditions of your licence, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of the custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply, and I will make a collection order. Those are the sentences. You may take them down.
You're watching there the recorder of Leeds, Judge Guy Curl, sentencing Samir Ali, 21 years old, for affray, and Adnan Ghafoor, who's 31 years old, for the same offence, both of which had surrendered themselves to police and admitted their guilt. But Ali sentenced to 20 months for affray, Adnan Ghafoor 18 months, and then also serving an additional 12 months for a suspended driving sentence, meaning he will spend the next 2.5 years in jail. Well, let's bring in Becky Cottrell, who is outside Leeds Crown Court for us. And Becky, just tell us more about what we've just been hearing.
Yes, this all sentenced around some violence that broke out just around the corner from here, outside the Art Gallery in Leeds, last Saturday. There had been some far-right protesters who had clashed with a group of about 17 Asian men, two of which were the defendants you were just hearing being sentenced there. It is not clear, the judge said, from CCTV footage of the evidence exactly what led to this clash. The defence barristers for these two men had claimed that they were the victims of racial abuse at the hands of the far-right protesters. But that could not be determined in the CCTV footage, although the judge accepted that that may have happened. It seems like, from what the judge has been describing, that Mr. Ali was the leader in this violence. He punched some of the far-right protesters and kicked a man who was lying on the floor before being pulled away by another person that was counter-protesting with him. We understand that Mr. Ghafoor also punched some of these men who were part of this far-right protest. The judge was keen to highlight it wasn't just the fact that they had been violent, but the fact that this violence had broken out in a public place next to a bar with a lot of people who would have seen this and been frightened. He also said that missiles were thrown by this group of counter-protesters, not just at the far-right protesters, but that one missile, we don't know what it was exactly, had been thrown at this bar of people. Now, the defence barristers were keen to highlight that Islamophobic threats had been made against these two men. The defence barrister for Mr. Ghafoor was also keen to highlight that he was sorry for his actions and that he realised how it would have upset and frightened people out in the town that day. We also heard character references for Mr. Ali. One of those was from the mosque where he volunteered, the mosque near him where he volunteers for the food bank. But ultimately, the judge said that regardless of what had taken place, whether or not they had been the victims of racial abuse, that didn't matter, that people who conduct themselves in this violent way must face the law. And that is why, he said today, he had to impose these jail sentences. Now, just to remind you, 20 months is what Mr. Ali will be serving, 2.5 years for Mr. Ghafoor. That's slightly longer because he had breached a suspended sentence. He had a previous conviction for dangerous driving and was serving a suspended sentence. This violence will have breached the conditions of that suspended sentence. Both men will be eligible to be released on licence halfway through their sentences, but it will be hoped by people in higher places that by sentencing people who get caught up in this violence, who instigate this violence, that other people who might be thinking about taking to the streets, whether that's far-right protesters or counter-protesters, as in the case of these two men, that they will be dissuaded doing so when they see the lengthy sentences. And the process for this has all been very fast. These men were convicted just this week. Now, in the context of the British court system, to be sentenced later in the same week is extremely fast, but it's all about getting this process done quickly and dissuading as many people as possible from continuing the violence that we've seen.
Becky, outside Leeds Crown Court, thank you so much. And as Becky was saying there, we've just heard from the recorder of Leeds, Judge Guy Curl, sentencing Samir Ali, who's 21 years old, to 20 months for affray after he punched and attacked 3 men, kicked 1 man whilst they were on the ground, was then seen laughing as he walked away. And also Ali and Ghafoor, who's 31 years, also sentenced for affray. Both of men submitting guilty pleas. Ali and Ghafoor sentenced to 18 months, an additional 12 months for a previous suspended sentence that was ongoing. He had hit a man whilst the man was being restrained, and these 2 individuals are part of an anti-racism demonstration in Leeds city centre on the 3rd of August when they came into contact with 4 individuals in the street latterly that evening. So Ali and Ghafoor and Samir Ali sentenced in Leeds Crown Court.
Notice for using threatening or abusive words or behaviour which were likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. You have been committed for sentence, having pleaded guilty to an offence of publishing written material which is threatening, abusive or insulting, intending thereby to stir up racial hatred. The context of your offending is that it arises out of the civil unrest and disorder in many parts of the United Kingdom. The unrest has been generated as a result of the death of 3 little girls in Southport and the reaction from various parts of our society towards other parts of our society. The disorder has been serious and widespread and has affected many towns and cities in England and in Northern Ireland. In particular, refugees and asylum seekers have been targeted. Coverage of the disorder and accompanying scenes of violence have been extensive, both in terms of mainstream media and also online on social media platforms. That is the context. I turn to the facts of this matter. On the night of the 2nd and 3rd of August, the Britannia Hotel in Leeds was attacked by people who threw missiles which damaged windows. The police were called, and on the 3rd of August the hotel was locked down for the protection of those who were living there. At the time there were 210 occupants, many of whom were foreign refugees and asylum seekers. Similar attacks to the hotel were launched on the 4th of August. The police attended on each occasion, and units were deployed to safeguard the hotel and to provide an increase in the police presence in the area. In between the 2 attacks, you took to social media in order to encourage others towards participation in the attacks upon the hotel. In a post on Facebook, you wrote, quote, "Every man and their dog."
Well, I'm sorry about that. As you could see from those words that appeared on the screen, we have to duck out of that sentencing there. But I think we might be able to go back to it. We'll go back to the sentencing over Facebook posts related to the rioting.
But it's all gravy. The initial post received 6 likes. However, it was sent to your 1,500 Facebook friends, and because of your lack of privacy settings, will have been forwarded to friends of your friends. The messages were therefore spread widely, which was plainly your intention. In response to a post questioning why, you wrote, "Because they're over here, given life of Riley, off the tax us hard-working people earn, when it could be put to better use. Come over here, with no work visa, no trade to their name, and sit down and doss, and then there's more people being put out homeless each year. They get top band priority on housing and many more reasons. You were arrested in the early hours of the 5th of August and then interviewed by the police. Your motivation became clear when you informed the police that you had promoted the idea of attacking the Britannia Hotel as a result of anger and frustration at immigration problems in the country. You went on to say that you did not want your money going to immigrants who, quote, rape our kids and get priority, end quote. Although you said that you had no intention of carrying out any act of violence, there can be no doubt that you were inciting others to do so. Otherwise, why post the comment? You expressed remorse, but by that time it was too late. For the offence of publishing written material in order to stir up racial hatred, there are sentencing guidelines which I must and will follow. The maximum sentence is 7 years imprisonment. In terms of culpability, it seems to me that your intention was to incite serious violence, which is a culpability A factor. In terms of the harm caused, I have considered both the harm actually caused and the harm intended to be caused as directed in the sentencing guidelines. You were encouraging others to attack a hotel which you knew was occupied by refugees and asylum seekers. The overall effect of your post was to incite violence towards the building and therefore towards those within the building. It was not only the refugees and asylum seekers who were likely to be affected by your post, but also the hotel managers, the night porters, and those who worked within the hotel. In my judgment, this comes close to harm category 1. However, for the purposes of this sentence, I will treat you as falling into category 2, since there was no direct encouragement towards activity which threatens or endangers life. However, you fall towards the top of category 2. For a category 2A offence, the starting point is 2 years imprisonment with a range between 1 and 4 years custody. For a category 2B offence, the starting point is 12 months with a range of up to 3 years custody. There is an obvious overlap between the ranges. That is deliberate. Your position is aggravated by the timing of your post, namely that it was at a time of social unrest and particular sensitivity across the country. I take account also of the need for increased policing, as I have indicated, partly as a consequence of your post. In mitigation, I take into account your plea of guilty, for which you will receive full credit of 1/3, following your earlier admissions. I take account of the contents of the references from your mother, friend and employer. These can only be of limited value in the current circumstances, as can the contents of the pre-sentence report. I take account, too, of your expression of remorse, your lack of convictions which are racially aggravated, that you are in employment and you have a partner and family. In passing sentence, I take into account the purposes of sentencing, in particular in relation to this case, punishment and deterrence. As is recognised on your behalf, this offence is so serious that an immediate custodial sentence is unavoidable. Would you stand, please? The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 20 months imprisonment. You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on licence. If you fail to abide by the conditions of your licence, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of the custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply, and I will make a collection order. Please take him down.
Well, that was the judge handing down a sentence of 20 months to this man, Jordan Parlour, who was accused and pleaded guilty to publishing written material intended to stir up religious hatred on Facebook. Sky's Becky Cottrell is at Leeds Crown Court for us now. Becky.
Well, this case was interesting because he didn't take part in the riots themselves. We understand that he was at home with a broken heel at this time. But he had incited others to go out and cause violence, specifically attacking a hotel in Leeds housing asylum seekers. Just let me read you out a couple of posts. He said that every man and his dog should smash expletive out of Britannia Hotel. He also said that asylum seekers are given a life of Riley of the tax of us hard-working people when it could be put to better use. And the judge said it was because of this incitement and the serious danger that posed that he was imposing this sentence.
Becky, thank you very much indeed.
Jordan Plain, you have been committed for sentence, having pleaded guilty to an offence of racially aggravated causing harassment, alarm or distress on the 6th of August of this year.
Over the riots.
The context of your offending is that it arises out of civil unrest in many parts of the United Kingdom. The unrest has been generated as a result of the death of 3 little girls in Southport and the reaction from various parts of our society towards other parts of our society. Stemming from that incident, groups of protesters have gathered in many locations and on occasions they have clashed, sometimes using violence towards each other, sometimes towards the police, sometimes towards entirely innocent and unconnected people and their property. In a democratic society such as that which exists in this country, people are entitled to protest peacefully. They are also entitled to express their views, whatever their views may be. But each of those freedoms to protest and to speak have limits and boundaries. When a protest moves away from being peaceful towards being violent, then it becomes illegal and against the law. When speaking, whether directly to others or through social media platforms, what is said must not contravene the law. The law applies to everyone, no matter what colour, race, religion or political persuasion they are. There is no distinction. The law is there to protect everyone in our society, both in terms of personal safety, safety of businesses, safety of premises, whether people's homes or commercial properties. It is against that background that you involved yourself in a protest outside Leeds Art Gallery on the Hedgerow on the 3rd of August. You joined with a pro-English Defence League group, chanting and gesticulating in the direction of a counter-protest who were demonstrating against racism. Your actions have been captured, at least in part, on closed-circuit TV. You can be seen to climb on a barrier and start to make monkey noises and gestures towards the counter-protesters, whose number included people of colour. You were saying that they looked like monkeys. On several occasions you rubbed your lips and shouted, "Rubber lips." You were standing alongside and in the same group as others who were making similarly racist and insulting comments. You then got down off the barrier. You started to imitate the manner in which Muslim people pray in order to mock their religion. This was grossly offensive, racist language and behaviour, and it caused alarm and distress to others, in particular to Miss Sawu, who has had the courage to come to court to tell me and others, including you, how she felt and how she feels. To summarise only, she was scared, anxious, traumatised by your behaviour. She was fearful of violence. She felt like she didn't belong in her own home city, the city of Leeds, where she has lived for all of her life, to the extent that she was scared to go to work for 4 days following this incident. She remains anxious and she remains worried about returning to work and to her university. You were arrested on the 5th of August and then interviewed. You are now 30 years of age, and in particular you have convictions in July of 2012 for racially aggravated causing fear of violence and criminal damage. Those convictions are an aggravating factor. You have further convictions as an adult, including for violence. What you have done cannot be viewed in isolation. It must be viewed against the background of unrest and disorder in the country. This was your contribution to that disorder. Your conduct and that of your group was designed to stir up racial hatred. It took place at a time when the social climate was particularly sensitive. By the 3rd of August, there had already been disorder in Southport, Manchester, Hartlepool, Aldershot, London, Liverpool and Sunderland. I will now turn to and follow the sentencing guidelines. In terms of culpability, I find that this falls into category A, since it involves the targeting of individuals by a group and it was a sustained incident. It also falls into category 1 for harm, since Miss Sawo and the people like her feared serious violence, not only on that day, but also on subsequent days. The starting point for a category 1A offence without the aggravating factor of racial aggravation is a high-level community order with a range of up to 26 weeks imprisonment. Given the context and the background of this incident and others around the country, I would have placed this offence at the top of the range. I must now consider the level of racial or religious aggravation involved and apply an appropriate uplift to the sentence in accordance with the guidelines. I am careful not to double count. I find that racial and religious aggravation was the predominant motivation for the offence, and you were associated with a group which was promoting hostility based upon colour, race, religion. In those circumstances, I will increase the starting point that I consider to be appropriate. As I have said, your position is aggravated by your convictions for similar offending in 2012 for which you received a custodial sentence. At the forefront of my mind are the purposes of sentence, which in this case are punishment and deterrence. In mitigation, I take into account that you pleaded guilty at the first available opportunity, and you will receive full credit, that being 1/3. I also take into consideration your letter indicating your remorse. I take account of the comments of the probation officer that you are a single man living alone but with responsibilities for a child with whom you have regular contact. You say that this behaviour was caused by intoxication, but I note the similar convictions in the past. You are expressed by to be a high risk of reoffending. You are not in employment, although apparently fit and well. I will now turn to the sentence. Would you stand, please? Given the context in which this incident occurred and the sustained nature of your conduct, which was designed to stir up racial hatred at a time of heightened social tension, an immediate custodial sentence cannot be avoided. The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 8 months' imprisonment. You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on licence. If you fail to abide by the conditions of your licence, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of your custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply, and I will make a collection order. Would you please take him down?
There you are, the judge at Leeds Crown Court sentencing this man, 30-year-old Jordan Plain, to 8 months in prison for racially aggravated harassment. We can go back to Leeds Crown Court. Becky Cottrell is there for us this afternoon. And Becky, we heard there in the summing up and the sentencing by the judge the pretty odious things Jordan Plain did.
Yeah, the judge was laying out very graphically the nature of these racist gestures that he was making. He was making monkey gestures. He was smacking his lips together and saying rubber lips, which the judge said was a racist slur against black people. We know that these were all directed at counter-protesters. He was part of a far-right demonstration that was taking place in Leeds city centre, and he was doing this at, as I say, a group of counter-protesters, which included people of colour. We also understand that the group he was with were aggravating Muslim people that were in the crowd at that point. They were wrapping scarves around their heads, pretending that they were wearing hijabs, and also imitating in an insulting way the way that Muslim people pray. And obviously this was all matters that the judge had to take into account when handing out that 8-month sentence. He also had to take into account the context in which this is all happening and the fact that this was only increasing racial tensions and the likelihood for violence that has been bubbling since the stabbings of those girls in Southport and the violence that we've seen ever since. Now, the defence barrister said that Mr Plain was genuinely remorseful and knows what he did was completely wrong. He also said that he tends to be led by others and that he was ashamed. But hearing what he did, hearing what others within that group did, it's pretty sickening to imagine the scenes that were taking place and hearing as well from about the impact that this has had on one woman who was passing at the time. She said that she had been left traumatised and very anxious after Mr Plain made those monkey gestures towards her. She said that she had felt unable to go to work for 4 days afterwards. She said she'd lived in Leeds her whole life, but now didn't feel safe in her hometown. And it's these individual stories that we've been hearing over the past couple of weeks of the impact that this is having on people. It's changing the way that, or amplifying at least, the way that people feel when they go about their everyday lives, their fear that they are going to be targeted just because of the colour of their skin. And that is why these cases are being processed so fast through the court system, to act as a deterrent to other people that might be thinking of coming out and participating in racist or violent behaviour.
Becky, thank you very much indeed. Well, police chiefs say they have now arrested nearly 600 people since the violent unrest began last week. Almost 160 have been charged in that time. It comes as the National Police Chiefs Council say forces are ready and prepared for any violence that may happen ahead of this weekend. Molly Malone has the latest.
That's exactly right, and that's simply because they've had more time to really gear up for that national response. They are really going into the weekend, I think, with a sense of cautious optimism, like the Prime Minister this morning, though, saying that they are still on high alert. And that's simply because we've seen less violence in recent days compared to the week before. They have been clear that really swift justice has had a significant impact, almost 600 arrests, close to 160 charges, but also that very public court appearances streamed on television, and also a steady stream of those faces that they're still looking of the people that they're still looking to find. All of that playing into, they think, less people turning out and wanting to cause significant violence and disruption. We've heard from police chiefs, as you said, Matt, this afternoon. They've now made nearly 600 arrests, and asked about the mood music, where they say they're feeling better prepared this weekend than they were last weekend. They've had much more time to prepare. They've also said that actually much of what's advertised and spread online about potential protests and potential events, well, they saw on Wednesday much of that didn't materialise. They said that they thought there were around 160 events that were advertised, and actually only 30 or so really materialised into something, and much of it, aside from a few pockets of disruption, was peaceful. They are, though, still keeping that kind of standing army, something we've heard about over the course of the last week, still mobilised and ready. Thousands of riot officers, around 5,000 tonight, they said, and 6,000 tomorrow, mobilised and ready to be deployed wherever they need to go. But they were also keen to emphasise that, look, we're heading into a weekend potentially of good weather, the football championships, all of that sort of thing, providing potential triggers for disruption. They say that they want to separate the game of football from those on the fringe that potentially want to cause trouble, but they are still ready to deploy as and when they need it. And specifically, those officers are kept ready to deploy to certain areas where they see and deem it necessary. So some definite cautious optimism, particularly around the work they said that communities are doing to really play their part in rallying against serious violence and disorder. But generally much more optimistic this weekend, heading into Saturday, into Sunday, than they were last.